let's dive into our main topic today, which is what are functions. Just like usual, I created a folder called Python Tutorial 3 on desktop and a new notebook file called What Are Functions. So there are actually a few different ways of looking at functions. A function, one way to look at it is that it's a collection of instructions, or it's a collection of code. And notice here that these lines I wrote here, they're not pieces of Python code. They're something called comments. So comments are used to comment on the code that we're going to write below. So you can use it to, for example, explain what variables you're defining and what functions we're going to define and so on. And we can tell that these two lines are comments because each of these two lines begin with the pound sign or the hashtag. So a function can be simply a collection of code. Let's see an example of that. Def function1 parentheses colon print print double quotes r2 and then print this is outside the function. This whole block says def for define, so define the following function and then give it a name which we can choose, and we're going to call it function1. We can call it any name we want, for example function 123 or fun. Let's keep it at function1 for now, and then parentheses colon. So a combination of all of these things are important. Def, the function name, parentheses, and colon, 4 spaces, print and 4 spaces again, print r2. And these spaces in front of these two lines are really important, just like with if-else statements, to show that these two lines are part of this function. If you had, for example, 4 spaces here and 5 spaces or 3 spaces, it just wouldn't work. And as you can see, outside of this function, we have a print statement that prints this is outside the function. Let's see what happens once we load or run this cell. As you can see, only this line has been printed. This is outside the function. What happened was this function called function1 has been defined as a collection of code, these two lines of code, print r and print r2. And after that's done, this line has been executed. So these two lines of code, print r and print r2, will not be executed, will not be run until we use this function, or we call, as we say, this function. To use this function or to call this function, you can just write function1, open parentheses, close parentheses, and that's it. When you run this cell, what's going to happen is these two lines of code will be executed for the first time. So R and R2 are printed here. And the nice thing about functions is that you can reuse them over and over again. So you can write function1 over here again, and actually you can even use it twice in the same cell. And so when you run this cell, function1 is executed twice, and these two lines of code are executed twice as well. So let's run the cell and let's see what's going to be printed. As expected, we see R2 twice. Okay, in addition to being a collection of instructions or a collection of code, a function can also be a mapping. So let's take a look at an example of that. Def function2 parentheses x colon return 2 times x or 2 star x. This means define a function called function2, which is going to take the input or an argument, and that argument we're going to call it x, and in return to whoever called this function, we're going to return 2 times x. So we're mapping the input x to the output 2 times x. Execute this cell, and to use this function or to call this function, you can write a equals function2 parentheses 3. And this says as an argument, use 3 and call this function function2. And once this expression is evaluated, function2 parentheses 3 will return 2 times x, in this case 2 times 3, which is 6, and then that number 6 will be assigned to the variable a, and that number 6 is called a return value or output. Let's see if this expression works by running the cell and by printing a. And we should see 6, and we do. Okay, let's try using this function a few more times. If you write b equals function2 parentheses 4, function 2 of parentheses 4 should return 8. So once we print b, we should see 8, and we do. And if you write c equals function 2 of 5, and then if you print c, you should see 10. And what if you try to call this function without any arguments? So if you write d equals function 2 parentheses with nothing inside, let's try running it. It'll actually give us an error saying function 2 missing one required positional argument, x. So this was an example of a function that maps one argument to a return value. Is it possible to have multiple arguments in a single function? The answer is yes. For that, you can write def function 3 x comma space y colon, and then let's write return x plus y. This means let's define a function called function 3, and then this function is going to take two arguments, x and y, and return x plus y. Let's load this function by running the cell, and let's write e equals function 3 parentheses 1 comma space 2. So function 3 1 comma space 2 should be evaluated to 1 plus 2, which is 3. So once we print e, we should see 3. Okay, so we saw two different ways of using a function so far. The first one was as a set of code or a collection of code, and then the second one was as a mapping. Now, it's even possible to combine them both together. Let's see how that works with this function, function 4 of x colon 4 spaces as usual, print x, print double quotes still in this function, and then return 3 times x or 3 star x. This function basically says take the argument x and then print x and print this string still in this function, and then return 3 times x to whoever called this function. Let's run this cell, and let's try calling this function with f equals function 4 parentheses 4. So what's going to happen here is when this expression is evaluated, function 4, 4, we go to this line. So x is printed, so that means 4, the number 4 will be printed, and then this string still in this function will be printed, and 3 times x, which is 12, will be returned to this expression. So that will be assigned to f. So once we run this cell, you see that 4 and still in this function are printed, and once you print f, you should see 12. Okay, let's see another example of a function. Def define function 5 parentheses sum underscore argument colon 4 spaces, print sum argument, and then print we in double quotes. Let's run this cell to load the function. And of course, you can call this function with function 5, 4. Let's run this cell, and then we see that 4 is printed because we have some argument being printed, and this string, is also printed. So one thing to note here is that even though function 5 is given an argument, we don't have a return value. It's actually technically possible to say f equals function 5 of 4 to assign whatever is returned from function 5 to f, but there isn't much of a point because we don't have any return statement here. Okay, let's now create a BMI calculator here. Now let's say we have 3 people here. We have a hypothetical person named YK here, whose height is 2 meters and whose weight is 90 kilograms. And here we have YK's sister, whose height is 1.8 meters and whose weight is 70 kilograms. And YK's brother is 2.5 meters in height and 160 kilograms in weight. What if we wanted to calculate the BMI for each person and determine if each person is overweight or not? We can do this by writing a simple function. Let's call this function BMI underscore calculator. And then this function is going to take 3 arguments: name, height in meters or height underscore m, and then weight in kilograms or weight underscore kg. In this function, write BMI weight underscore kg divided by height underscore m double star sign 2. So this says, of course, height in meters squared. And what we could do is we could return BMI here, but let's do something a little bit different here. We're going to write print double quotes BMI and then print BMI. So this is going to print the BMI of the given person. And then if the BMI is less than 25, this person is not overweight. So we could return not overweight, but to show this person's name, you can just write name plus not overweight. So the assumption here is that name is a string, and when you have two strings, you can concatenate them together with name plus double quotes not overweight. And then let's write else colon return name plus is overweight. And note here that there are 8 spaces here because this else statement is in the function Bmi Calculator, and then this line is in the else statement within the Bmi Calculator function. So let's run this cell, and then let's write result 1 equals Bmi Calculator parentheses name 1 height underscore m1 weight underscore kg1. So this is for the first person, and let's do the same thing for the second person and the third person. Let's run this cell. So here we see the BMI for the 3 people, 22.5 for the first person, 21.6 for the second person, and 25.6 for the third person. And to get the result, we can print result 1, result 2, and result 3. And then we see YK not overweight, YK's sister not overweight, YK's brother is overweight. Actually, we forgot to put is before not, so let's fix that. Go back to the function and then put is here. Run this cell again to update the function, and then run this cell below that, and then let's try printing the results again. Okay, it's fixed. So YK is not overweight, YK's sister is not overweight, and YK's brother is overweight. Okay, now I have a little task for you. Create a function called, let's say, convert, that converts miles into kilometers. So you should be able to call your function just like this, with a function called convert, which takes miles as the argument and returns kilometers as a return value. And here you can use this formula, kilometers equals 1.6 times miles. Okay, if you want to get the answer to this question, just go to csdojo.io/python3 to download the sample file. And you can subscribe to my newsletter by going to csdojo.io/news to make sure you don't miss my future tutorials. I'm YK from CS Dojo, and I'll see you in the next video.